Why would a prophet, guided by divine revelation, entrusted with sacred wisdom, order the construction of a palace made of glass, not of gold nor carved from marble, but crafted so flawlessly that the human eye would mistake it for water? Was it an architectural marvel meant to impress Queen Balqis? Or was it something deeper, an intentional trial concealed within beauty? When Balqis approached the palace, she lifted her robe, thinking she was about to step into a pool. But what if that moment, subtle, spontaneous, was never about modesty? What if it was a test, a revelation of her true nature? In that quiet instant, as glass reflected light and intention, something ancient stirred. Was her lineage purely human, or was there something more? Something whispered in both folklore and fear, that Balqis was not entirely of mankind. The Qur'an recounts the scene, but leaves its meaning veiled. It describes her surprise, her humility, her submission, but not the deeper reason why Sulaiman created a palace of glass. Could it be that this prophetic king, who commanded not just men but jinn, sought to expose a hidden truth without uttering a word? That the palace was never just a floor, but a mirror, not of the body, but of the soul? If so, the real question is not what Balqis saw, but what we are meant to see through it. Balqis was not just a queen. She was radiant, graced with beauty, intelligence, and power that drew the admiration of kings and the attention of prophets. Her throne was a symbol of might. Her wisdom impressed even Sulaiman. But beneath all her glory, a whisper stirred, a rumor that refused to die. Some said she was not entirely human. According to ancient traditions, Balqis may have descended from an Ifrit, a powerful being of smokeless fire, through union with a mortal woman. If that were true, she carried more than royal blood. She bore a lineage the jinn feared. Why? Because if Sulaiman married her and their union bore a child, that child would be unlike any born before. A human heir infused with jinn heritage, yet raised within the covenant of divine authority. Such a descendant would hold terrifying potential. The power of prophetic command combined with a bloodline that linked two realms. To the jinn, this meant subjugation, forever. The idea that a hybrid heir could enslave them not only physically but legally within the divine order was intolerable, and so the whisper grew into a quiet rebellion. But Sulaiman did not confront Balqis with accusation. He did not expose her with force. Prophets do not need to shout. Instead, he set a stage, transparent, silent, in plain sight. A test without a single word. A palace made of glass, designed to catch light, but built to reveal truth. He would let her own steps declare what her lips would never need to say. Sulaiman was a prophet who did not need to threaten. He did not rely on force, coercion, or confrontation. When he sought truth, he didn't demand it, he revealed it. His method was not to interrogate, but to illuminate. And that is the wisdom of a prophet, to create a space so transparent, so sacred, that falsehood cannot survive within it. He did not ask Balqis whether she was fully human. He did not accuse her or challenge her lineage. Instead, he built a palace, crafted not with jewels or gold, but with glass so pure and flawless that it mirrored the sky and deceived the eye. The test was not a question. It was architecture. It was silence shaped into form. Sulaiman understood that words could be twisted, but light never lies. The truth would not come from Balqis's mouth. It would rise through her instinctive reaction. When she stepped upon that glistening floor and mistook it for water, she lifted her garment. It was a simple gesture, but in that moment, everything hidden became seen. Her body moved before her mind could guard it, and so, without a single word, the truth emerged. This was not a trap. It was a mirror. A prophet does not deceive. He reveals. And by crafting a test of silence, Sulaiman honored both the dignity of Balqis and the integrity of divine judgment. No violence, no shame, only light, truth, and a step forward. This is the prophetic way, not to dominate, but to design a moment where truth reveals itself, and only those who carry shadows fear the light. Glass is a material that hides nothing. It reveals what lies beneath, offering no shelter for deceit. Water, in many traditions, symbolizes the soul, fluid, reflective, deep. And light is truth in motion, the divine presence that exposes, purifies, and clarifies. When glass, water, and light converge, what emerges is not merely a flaw, it is a mirror of the spirit. In Sulaiman's palace, we do not see architecture for vanity. We see theology in physical form, a test built not of commands, but of symbols, not of judgment, but of revelation. The floor shimmered like water. It reflected not only the sky above, but the soul of the one who walked upon it. Balqis was not questioned, she was not accused, but when she lifted her garment, reacting to what she thought was water, her gesture became more than reflex. It became confession, not of sin, but of identity. It was not shameful, it was sacred. It told the world, I am not hidden, I have nothing to fear from reflection. I can step forward into light. This act, so subtle, so human, became the moment when all rumors fell silent. She was not a jinn, she was a woman. Noble and real, able to pass the test not by force, but by grace. The palace did not need guards or interrogators. It was built to let truth shine through the silence. A prophet's wisdom is not in what he says, but in what he builds. And the palace was a sermon, crafted in glass, reflecting light, unveiling the soul. Balqis stepped toward the threshold of the palace. Before her stretched a floor that shimmered like liquid silver, glittering under the desert sun. It looked like water, deep, placid, mysterious. She paused. No one said a word. There was no voice from the heavens, no warning from the guards, no command from Sulaiman. But in that silence, a decision formed. If I walk forward, she thought, my garments will be soaked. And so, almost instinctively, she lifted the hem of her skirt, revealing her legs. What seemed like a small, almost trivial gesture echoed across dimensions. Sulaiman saw, but not with the eyes of a man. He did not watch to judge modesty or beauty. He watched with the insight of a prophet, searching for something far deeper, her nature. If she were Jinn, her legs would have revealed it. If she were merely illusion, her body would betray the truth. But what was seen? Flesh, muscle, bone, human, unmistakably, irreversibly human. But even more than the biology, it was the reflex that spoke louder than any genealogy. Only a human, unknowing of a test, fearing no exposure, would act with such sincerity. No disguise, no calculation, just truth in motion. She passed a divine examination without even realizing she had entered it. And that is the miracle. Not that she was human, but that she lived truthfully when she thought no one was asking. This is when the world shifted. In the silence of her step, she answered the question of origin. In the humility of her gesture, she qualified herself for something greater than rule or riches. She proved herself worthy of covenant, not through bloodline, but through unfiltered authenticity. No decree was read, no voice thundered. But in that moment, the divine nodded, and Balqis became more than queen. She became chosen. The moment Balqis stepped across the glass floor, something deeper than suspicion shattered, both in the heart of Sulaiman and within Balqis herself. It was more than a test of nature. It was an unveiling of identity, of intent, of essence. Until that point, the air had been thick with questions. Was she truly human? Was she hiding something? Was this alliance safe? But the silence of the test and the clarity of its result answered more than any interrogation ever could. And yet, the real revelation did not belong to Sulaiman alone. It unfolded inside Balqis. She, who had ruled with pride, had arrived with stature, had worn her beauty like armor. She now found herself disarmed, not by force, but by design. No one preached to her, no one threatened her. But the architecture itself, its purity, its symbolism, its impossible light, spoke to her in a voice beyond language. She saw herself reflected. Not the queen, not the outsider, just a soul. No judgment, no accusation, just truth. Quiet, unwavering, and patient. For the first time in perhaps her entire reign, she felt no need to prove her worth. No desire to defend her lineage, no urgency to hold her crown tightly. She simply stood, unmasked, undisguised. And that was enough. All the rumors dissolved, all the resistance faded. What remained was not a woman defeated, but a heart awakened. In that instant, Balqis moved from spectacle to sincerity, from royalty to reverence. She was no longer defined by how others saw her, but by how the light revealed her. This is the pivot only divine encounters can achieve. When the truth doesn't accuse you, it invites you. When you're not asked to surrender, but you do anyway, because it feels like coming home. And that's what she did. She bowed, not to Sulaiman, but to the clarity of what she now knew to be true. Sulaiman's palace was never merely a dwelling, it was a divine mirror. Its floor of glass was not meant to impress, but to reveal. It did not conceal flaws, it invited them to be seen. And in this sacred space, where light danced like truth and water whispered like spirit, the soul could no longer hide behind crown or lineage. The architecture itself became a gentle prophet, silent, radiant, unavoidable. For Balqis, the test was not humiliation, but invitation. Not a trap, but a mirror. She was not asked to confess, only to walk. She was not shamed, only reflected. And when she lifted her skirt to step forward, it was more than a physical gesture. It was a spiritual crossing. She moved from presumption to perception, from guardedness to surrender. Not to a man, not even to a prophet, but to truth itself. In that moment, her soul passed through a kind of baptism, not of water, but of clarity. It wasn't that she became someone new, but that who she truly was finally seen, without defense, without disguise. And what the glass revealed was not guilt or impurity, but honesty. Her gesture, uncalculated and human, became a sacred answer to a silent question. And perhaps this is the legacy of Sulaiman's palace, not its splendor, but its wisdom. That truth does not always need to be spoken, that the soul, when placed in the right light, will reveal itself. And that submission is not weakness, but recognition. A moment when the heart, uncoerced, bows to something greater, not because it must, but because it sees itself clearly and chooses to. Are you living in the light, or simply avoiding the mirror that has been placed before your soul? The story of Balqis is not just an ancient tale of royalty and prophecy. It is your story, my story, the story of anyone who has ever hesitated to be seen for who they truly are. Sulaiman didn't interrogate, he didn't accuse, he didn't shame. He simply built a space where the light would do what words never could, reveal. And then he waited to see who would step forward. That silent invitation still echoes today. The glass floor may no longer be under our feet, but the mirror remains in our decisions, our truths, our hidden selves. And the question lingers, when your moment comes, will you step into the light? Not because you are flawless, not because you are ready, but because you are willing to be real. The covenant was never for the perfect. It was always for the brave. Those who dared to show up, exposed and unpolished, yet still stepped forward. Today, you are being offered the same silent test, not with words, not with pressure, but with presence. And if you can stand in that light, just as you are, you may find that the mirror does not condemn, it confirms. So dare to step forward, not to impress, not to prove, but to be. Because in the reflection, you may not just see your flaws. You may see your calling. You may see a soul ready to carry the covenant into the world, not because it must, but because it was chosen. You've heard the ancient warnings from the book of Jubilees, how the Watchers, once holy beings, broke the divine covenant by taking human wives and producing hybrid offspring, the Nephilim. These children, born of heaven and earth, were not merely anomalies, they were threats to the sacred rhythm God had established. Their existence marked the beginning of corruption, violence, and a rupture in the divine order. But what if that story was not unique to the time before the flood? What if something eerily similar reappeared much later, hidden in the folds of another sacred text? In the Qur'an, there is the mysterious figure of Balqis, the Queen of Sheba. She was powerful, wise, and breathtakingly beautiful. But rumors swirled around her. Some claimed she was not fully human, that she had Jin blood. If this is true, then her meeting with Prophet Sulaiman was not just a diplomatic or spiritual encounter. It was a moment of cosmic consequence. Because Sulaiman was no ordinary prophet, he had dominion not only over men, but over jinn. And if he fathered a child with Balqis, a child of both prophetic lineage and jinn descent, what would that child be? The Jinn had reason to be terrified. Such a child might not just inherit authority over their kind, it could seal their subjugation forever. Jubilees warns us what happens when divine boundaries are crossed. So, was Balqis a threat to covenantal purity? Was her presence a test, a trap, or a turning point? For the first time, the stories of Jubilees and the Qur'an are placed side by side, not to compete, but to reveal a hidden thread. A theological tension spanning centuries. Who has the right to carry God's covenant? And what happens when the bloodline is no longer pure? The fear of the Jinn wasn't just superstition, it may have been prophetic. In the book of Jubilees, the Watchers, the angels once appointed to guard and guide humanity, fell not through war or betrayal, but through desire. They descended, not with swords, but with longing. They took human women as wives and bore children, the Nephilim. These beings, massive and powerful, did not belong to the ordained structure of creation. They were outside the rhythm. Their very existence was seen as a rupture, a rebellion against the sacred order. And so, the punishment was swift and severe. The Watchers were imprisoned, and the Nephilim were wiped out by the flood. From that moment, any crossing of species, any mixed lineage between divine and mortal, was no longer just a mistake. It was a crime against the covenant. But then, centuries later, a different echo began to stir. In the Qur'an, we meet Balqis, Queen of Sheba, surrounded by mystery, feared for her beauty, and whispered to be of Jinn descent. When Sulaiman, a prophet who commanded not only men but Jinn, encountered her, the stakes shifted. Love was not the problem. The real terror, the kind that sent ripples through the unseen world, was the possibility of offspring. If Sulaiman and Balqis bore a child, that child would be a hybrid, royal, prophetic, and possibly carrying the blood of Jinn. And unlike the Watchers' Nephilim, this child might not be destroyed. He might be enthroned. He might inherit the covenant. To the Jinn, that was unthinkable. It meant their submission would not end with Sulaiman. It would continue, passed down like an inheritance, encoded in blood. A permanent dominion. So, the Jinn did what the Watchers never could. They whispered. They sowed fear. They tried to stop it, not with war, but with rumors and resistance. And once again, the heavens held their breath. Because if the covenant could be inherited by a hybrid, then what did purity really mean? Who then could stand in the presence of God's law? The Book of Jubilees does not treat lineage as a biological accident. It treats it as sacred architecture, designed, guarded, and preserved through divine selection. From Adam to Seth, from Noah to Shem, from Eber to Abraham, the covenant lineage is a golden thread that must never be entangled with foreign strands. It's not just about ancestry, it's about alignment. The people of the covenant were not only marked by belief, but by birth, by a purity of origin that safeguarded their role as bearers of divine order. So when the Watchers, beings from heaven, broke the covenant by uniting with human women, it wasn't merely lust, it was spiritual treason. The children born from this union, the Nephilim, were not just hybrids of flesh and spirit, they were disruptions. Their blood carried a fracture in the rhythm God had woven through generations. The flood was not just to cleanse the earth of violence, it was to protect the integrity of the sacred line. Jubilees records a warning issued after the deluge. Never again should the chosen line be diluted, not by angels, not by other nations, not even by personal desire. The law, as recorded in Jubilees, is adamant. Let not any of the seed of Israel mingle with the seed of the nations, for the holy race is not for mixing. This is not a statement of superiority. It is a boundary of responsibility. To carry the covenant is to carry the weight of purity, not racial but spiritual. It is a charge to preserve the blueprint of divine intention across time. This context makes the case of Balqis more unsettling. If she was indeed of Jin origin, then the possibility of her bearing a child with Sulaiman would not be a mere royal alliance. It would be a spiritual test. One that echoes the warnings of Jubilees and the fear of the Jinn. Because if the bloodline of a prophet merged with that of another species, would the child still qualify as heir to the covenant? Or would the line be broken once more? The Jinn were never forbidden from feeling. They were not cast out of divine favor for their emotions, but they were bound by one immutable law: never interfere with the divine order. Their realm was separate, their power real, but their position subordinate. And Sulaiman, he was not just a prophet. He was the only man granted command over them by divine decree. His voice was law even to those made of smokeless fire. But what if the boundary blurred? What if he took a Jinn, or someone of Jinn descent, as his queen? What if she bore him a child? This was not just the stuff of legend, it was their deepest fear reflected back at them. Because a child born of Sulaiman, heir to the covenant, mingled with the blood of Jinn, would carry something new, something terrifying. It would mean the untamable had become part of the sacred, that the Jinn, long cast to the margins of revelation, would now have a stake in the covenant itself, not as rebels, not as subjects, but as kin. And such a child would not merely inherit power, it would be legitimized. And once legitimized, the old hierarchy would collapse. This is why the glass palace matters. It was not just a place of splendor, it was a place of testing. Sulaiman didn't ask Balqis to declare her nature. He let the architecture ask for him, and it's possible, whispered in apocryphal echoes, that the rumors about Balqis weren't born from observation, but from fear. That the Jinn, desperate to preserve their separation, began the tale that she was not fully human, because if she was, their fate could not be undone. But if she was one of them, then the covenant could not include her. This is the mirror they feared, not one made of glass, but one that could show them their future, bound not by chains, but by blood. What if Sulaiman had a son with Balqis, not just a prince, but an heir whose bloodline carried both the prophetic legacy of Israel and the hidden essence of the Jinn? This is no idle question. The Book of Jubilees makes one thing painfully clear. Mixed lineages, when outside the covenant, invite chaos. The Nephilim were proof. Their birth shattered divine order, and their very existence demanded a flood to erase them. But what if this union was different? What if it wasn't rebellion, but revelation? Sulaiman's test wasn't just for Balqis, it was for the heavens watching. The glass palace was not merely a trap to expose her, but a filter of truth. It didn't punish, it revealed. And once she passed through its light, unhidden and unchanged, the possibility emerged that her child, if born, would not be a threat, but a fulfillment. A hybrid, yes, but not of error. of intention. A child born in covenant, not in defiance of it. This was the terror that echoed through the unseen realm. For centuries, the Jinn had lived on the edge of divine law, powerful but excluded. If one of them, or someone tied to them, could give birth to a rightful heir, then the boundary that had protected their freedom would be erased. Dominion would no longer be a matter of might, but of inheritance, and the covenant would stretch further than ever before. Perhaps this is why the rumors of Balqis' nature were seeded in fear, not truth. Because if she was human, the Jinn would be ruled. But if she wasn't, if she could be exposed, then the prophecy could be halted. The palace of glass, then, was more than a reflection. It was a line in the sand, separating what was forbidden from what might be sanctified. And when she passed the test, a door creaked open in heaven, to a future some were never ready to face. The Jinn could not overpower Sulaiman. They could not bind him, bribe him, or hide from him. But they could do one thing. They could plant a doubt. And so they whispered into shadows, weaving a rumor that Balqis was not fully human, that her beauty was unnatural, that her wisdom was borrowed, that she was perhaps one of them. They didn't need proof. They needed only a seed. Because in the court of kings, it's not facts that rule, it's perception. And if the people could be made to question her nature, then even a child born in light could be treated as born in error. This was their strategy. Taint the story before it began. Make the holy seem suspicious. Make the pure seem strange. Because if they could distort Balqis's identity, then they could discredit any future shaped by her womb. This is how darkness works, not by overwhelming the light, but by smearing it before it shines. Sulaiman, however, was not deceived. He did not listen to rumors. He did not interrogate Balqis, nor demand proof of her purity. Instead, he built a mirror, made of glass and sunlight, and simply invited her to walk forward. No judgment, no accusation, just light. And light, unlike rumor, cannot be manipulated. It reveals. It purifies. It separates truth from suspicion without a single word spoken. When Balqis lifted her skirt and stepped forward, the rumors shattered. The truth stood unveiled. And the Jinn, for all their whispers, could do nothing but watch as the Jau'uk moved one step closer to being renewed through a woman they had tried to deny and a test they could never pass. From the ancient scrolls of Jubilees to the sacred verses of the Qur'an, one principle remains unshaken. The covenant cannot be inherited by chaos. Divine order does not bend to beauty, power, or legend. It responds only to alignment. In Jubilees, bloodlines are protected not because of superiority, but because they carry the rhythm of sacred time. Once that rhythm is broken, through pride, rebellion, or unauthorized mixing, the covenant withdraws. Yet if someone, no matter their origin, steps into the light and does not shatter, that too is a sign. Balqis stood on the edge of suspicion. A woman whispered to be half-Jinn, a queen from a distant land. But when she stepped onto glass, into the realm of clarity, she did not crack. She did not flinch. And most importantly, she did not flee. The glass did what rumors could not. It revealed. And what it revealed was not her race nor her past, but her readiness. Because no soul can forge transparency, no lineage can mimic light, and no falsehood can reflect truth. What matters in the end is not where someone came from, but what they mirror when they stand unguarded before the divine. Balqis reflected order, humility, and submission. That is why she was welcomed, not into a palace, but into the story of sacred inheritance. Are you a descendant of prophets? Probably not. Do you carry the blood of the covenant? Perhaps no one can say for sure, but maybe, just maybe, you carry something far more powerful, the spirit that does not tremble when it steps into the light. The covenant does not choose the strongest. It does not ask for perfect lineage. It looks for those willing to be seen, truly seen, without disguise. It seeks those who do not run from reflection, who do not fear the mirror. In a world ruled by noise and appearances, the true heir is not the one with the loudest voice or the purest blood, but the one who dares to walk barefoot into truth. That is what Balqis did. That is what the glass palace still asks of us today. So now the question turns to you. If the glass floor were set before you, would you step forward? Would your soul stand transparent under the light? Not because you're perfect, but because you're ready. Ready to carry what others dropped. Ready to reflect what cannot be forged. Maybe, just maybe, you are the one chosen to keep the covenant alive, one more sacred cycle.